Well, welcome. We'll get started. We're already 5 minutes behind, so I hope that's not an omen as to how my meeting management goes, but generally I'm pretty good. So thanks, Amanda, for sending out the agenda. Jake and Amanda and I got together a couple weeks ago and kind of talked through all things transition. So obviously still getting my feet under me, but hopefully you all will be forgiving, I'll say, when I make missteps, which I'm sure I'll do. But so with that, we'll just move on to the meeting and minutes. So we've got a list of our upcoming meeting dates and clerks. This is helpful to have it here. I know in the past we had it on another sheet, but I think having it front and center is helpful, especially so that the person who's on is aware. So obviously meeting tonight. Are there any other dates that are in the people have conflict with, that we have? I think we've managed to miss the school vacation weeks, but that only applies to a few of us. Anything anyone sees there, or generally everybody will be able to make the dates that are listed? I don't know if I can run the meeting and take notes. I think that might be, I might have to figure that out. I guess I could take them after the fact since it's recorded. I could do that.
February looks good to me.
Okay.
Just checking March.
Yeah, it's not the, I know it's, I will be out school vacation week. It's not the week of vacation. So I'm not sure about the April 20th.
So Courtney, you shouldn't have to take notes, I think. So we ought to start again July 20th.
Okay, all right.
I mean, it's
and maybe by then we'll have an extra member or two. That would be the goal. So, so we can spread it out a bit more. Okay, all right. Well, I'm not hearing any objections for now. We'll check in again on these next time. So hopefully everyone got a chance to review the minutes. Scott's departing task was to do minutes for the last meeting, which he did. And so were there any points of discussion from the meeting minutes sent out? It should be. They were well done. In fact, I felt like he used the recording and took them almost verbatim. So at least some of them felt very exact.
They were super detailed for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm hearing no comments or changes. So with that, could I entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from the December 15th meeting?
I move that we approve the minutes.
Great. A second?
I second.
Second.
All right. And then we vote, correct? Still getting the Robert's Rules of Order here. Everyone in favor, say, raise your hand. I think that's probably easier. Or say aye. Maybe we should say aye since we are recording it if the video isn't recorded. Is the video recorded as well?
yeah.
Okay. Then never mind. We're good. All right, then we will approve the minutes from December 15th. With that, we've already made up a couple minutes because that was very fast. So the chair's update, I don't have a whole lot. I think a lot of my update I said in the first 2 minutes as I'm still getting my feet under me. But you know, so I think we'll talk through a lot of these things later on. There was one thing I wanted to bring up. Well, I'm sure we'll cover it before the night is out. So, you know, I think as I get more connected with other committees and kind of discussions around town, I will be able to provide more of an update. So I will concede my time to Amanda because I felt like she had a very detailed update, and there may be things that the committee has questions on. I know she was going to highlight just a couple of things, but there was quite a lot on there. So Amanda, do you want to go ahead and do
Hey,
your highlight?
Courtney, before we transition, I just, one item that maybe, I think we talked about a little bit last time, just might be kind of recruiting
Oh, yes.
new
Thank you.
members, which I think might make sense to talk about now, potentially, but I don't, that was the only one thing I was thinking of that.
No, good idea.
I'm not
Yeah, we
sure
don't
if that's
have it.
part of the later agenda or not. But.
Well, we don't have it as a later agenda item, so why don't we take a moment to discuss it now? We can, and it may have been, I'm not sure if it was in your update, Amanda, but maybe it bridges. So we had talked about in the past, I think this board has been largely invite, either from other CAB members, through Kate or through Kate directly. And I think because we haven't identified more than maybe one, maybe two folks that we know, to reach out to. I think Jake, you had one person. Scott did mention someone, but he didn't seem to have any follow-up on that. So I'm not sure if that was real or not. So when Jake and Amanda and I met, we talked about the idea of putting a call for volunteers for both CSEC and CAB in Amanda's sustainability newsletter that goes out monthly, kind of to broaden the network a little bit, but not broadcasted it far and wide. And maybe that's, maybe we want to do the far and wide at some point, but kind of trying to balance between a very targeted approach and, in getting folks who have some background to bring to this, and not just, something to do, so to speak, which I don't think we would get in reality, but you never know. So, and because both us and CSEC are looking for additional members, we thought it would be a good way to do that. First of all, I wanted to ask, how many on CAB have subscribed to Amanda's newsletter? Because I had not until we talked about it. Okay, good. So Paul is on it. All right, so most of you, good. We felt that everyone on this board, at least, and CSEC as well, should be getting the newsletter. So before I guess I pass it back to Amanda, any thoughts from CAB on that approach? So we were going to target the next update, which be later in January, for our invite. And then once, we see if we get feedback and get some interest, we could, I think, we could do it a couple of different ways. We could actually have interested candidates come to a board meeting, I guess would be as the public, or as a interviewee. I'm not sure. We didn't get that far in our discussion. So I'd be curious to know if any CAB members have a thought on how we actually select, whether it's just Amanda and I meeting with them and you trust us, or and we sort of put forth proposed candidates and we discuss. John, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I don't have any thoughts on that really, but I was wondering if there were green cards for this committee, and also noting we could be a more diverse group. You're the only woman on the committee.
Right. It didn't start out that way.
No, it didn't start out that way. So I think we should think about that, as well as trying to have some other ways of being representative of the community.
We did have a few green cards that we looked at. So we do have a few of those. Do you want to talk to that, Amanda?
Yeah, so we did pull the green cards back in November. Many of them are either on other committees, or CAB and CSEC were not listed as their top committee of interest. There were 2 candidates where those didn't apply. But we too thought of the diversity point and thought maybe it would be good to do a broader call with that in mind. And I just wanted to reiterate that CSEC is also needing a committee member. And so it is kind of a nice opportunity just to say, if you want to get involved, there are these formal committees. And I can also mention that there are other informal committees that people can be a part of. Like there's an EV working group and some other things. So, you know, potentially a way to even get folks that listed CAB and CSEC of interest. Maybe there are other ways that they can be involved too. So,
Yeah, Warren.
Yeah, couple things. I like the idea of including a call in Amanda's newsletter. Second, I trust Amanda and Courtney to make a decision on appropriate candidates. And third, in the interest of diversity, have we ever considered getting somebody of high school age?
Ooh, I don't know that had crossed my mind, but interesting. Yeah, maybe we should try to think about that. That might be a different target audience we need to put the call out to. I know the high school has a couple of different climate related committees. I guess that's what they call them, because my daughter sits on one. So it might be something we could open up if if CAB.
Yeah, I just throw that out, and others may not think that's a good idea, but I put that out for consideration, not put that out thinking that I am 100% behind the idea.
Sure.
I mean, one thing that I had some experience with this, I mean, I think it's a good idea to get high school students involved, so get a youth perspective. But obviously, if you pick a senior, they may not be around for even a year.
Right.
Right? So,
Yeah.
so there are some logistical issues there.
Yeah. Michael.
What about the idea of maybe an intern? You know, that somehow we broadcast it out. I don't think anyone, and I think it's a great idea, Amanda, to have it in the newsletter. But I don't think that anyone really knows that there's this opportunity, and somehow we have to be so careful with that, because we might end up with a flood of so many people, right? But it might be better than having no one, applying. But what a great opportunity for and I'm thinking more of a college or a university intern, or someone in an organization, environmental organization, might find this a good opportunity, perhaps.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
that all sounds great. That was one of my updates. And so
Okay.
the other one was just to say that I did review the CAB and CSEC charges. I mean, there's obvious overlap because the topic area is the same, but it does feel like there is a distinction between the two. And so I think as long as we continue to operate efficiently and we feel that the capacity of our volunteer base and committee members is not being diminished by having two committees, then I think we continue to move forward as planned as two separate committees, and then to also try out the joint meetings. And so Courtney and Jerry and I will meet before our next meeting to discuss what that will look like. And it felt like the board was supportive of that the last time that we talked about it. So I don't want to spend too much time on that, but just wanted to say that we followed up on that, and that was sort of the resolution. And I also am not planning to spend a lot of time on the director's update, except to say that I did one of these last month, I did it this month, and I'll continue to do it. And it is based off of the practice that Kate had in place where she had an update. I think I've probably added in a few more things, and there's going to be just some active ongoing things that I'll try to provide an update on, and maybe use this time more for any questions that people have related to any of the bullet items, so that we're focused on things that the board may be interested in. And I may highlight a few things here and there that feel impactful. And you probably saw an email from me that the home rule petition did, was a part of a hearing this morning with the Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy Committee. Town Manager LaFleur submitted a written testimony, and I gave an oral representation of that this morning, along with Matt Johnson, who also testified. Alice Kaufman did a huge effort on organizing signatures and writing written statements as well. And so just want to thank those who supported that effort, and hopefully we see a favorable outcome come out of that committee. It was one-sided in that the people that were there were advocating for it, and I didn't hear, I did have to leave early, so they may have come after, but everyone that was testifying was in support of our home rule petition and also the statewide legislation. And so just to kind of give an update on where that currently sits.
Let me comment a little bit on that, Amanda, because I think you underestimated what you and Matt did. The hearing that Senator Barrett did and Representative Roy was super high quality today. Language, the logic, the necessity, just the opportunity. And Amanda and Matt did a tremendous job, bringing forward the case of Concord, as did the other communities that were there. The two things that I felt were so compelling about it is that one, the fluency and the language has changed. 2 to 3 years ago, when we were talking about the home rule petition as it relates to a strategic piece around decarbonization, particularly in the new construction space, it was on the margins. It was almost a boutique kind of piece that would fit into the larger next generation plan that Governor Baker had. Today, it was not on the margins. All of the senators and representatives there and the people who commented, it gave a real sense that it is at the center now. And I'm an optimistic guy, but I couldn't help but believe that we are really at a tipping point. So that was encouraging. I think the other thing that was perhaps alarming to me, which was the testimony that came from a woman in Western Massachusetts that said that what builders are doing in Western Mass is they're now moving propane deliverable fuels into new construction. And part of that is that, if you're familiar, there's a challenge going on in Western Mass with the distribution of gas and a lot of tension around that. And to hear that builders are responding to that by way of thinking about how to introduce fossil fuels through propane deliverable fuels is something that it was a signal to me that something we really need to pay attention to. But all in all, it was just an extraordinary hearing of quality. And I think we should be encouraged by it, but certainly sticking with our knitting to make sure that it in fact comes forward. Because the notion of waiting, which is what up until now, there has been this sense of let's wait, because we already have a state initiative in play, and the state initiative, obviously all cities and towns engaged in this would be preferable. But here was the case, and what came out of the hearing today was the notion that our municipalities that have moved so courageously forward can serve as the test kitchen. I love that idea, the test kitchen, so that it doesn't have to be a waiting ploy, but we can get out immediately and learn from the municipalities. And then we actually empower a state initiative going forward. So those were two pieces that I felt that were very encouraging. And Amanda, you and Matt were terrific.
So what's the next step here for this home rule petition at this point?
So I think the committee will decide to give it a favorable review or not, and then it will go back out to the larger legislature, would be the next piece.
And does the your note there says that it's on, it seems like it's on standby until the statewide net zero energy code comes out. So is the thought that, I mean, would that, is it going to continue to stay on standby, or I guess it depends on timing?
Yeah, and I will say that I drafted this prior to learning of the hearing,
Okay.
and that was the quick turnaround. I think we heard Thursday or Friday, and then we're sort of coordinating over the 3-day weekend to get something together for this morning. And so this update is somewhat less relevant, and what I just gave is a little bit more updated than what's listed here.
All right, any more? Oh, yeah, John.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of timing, the governors has said has been saying, and I guess we'll see, but has been saying they'll propose the net zero code by March. So it's only a couple months away. And then of course it has to go through the hearing process and all that, but the legislation requires them to adopt the code by the end of the year. I think there was the Globe article today indicated end of next year, but I think that was wrong.
Year.
Yeah. And then the other thing is the governors convened the commission, the Clean Heat Commission. So I think we should try to follow that. Cami Peterson from MAPC is on that commission, and I'm sure she will represent municipal views pretty strongly, but it would be good to try to be in touch with her in case we want to give her any input that she can convey or help shape her engagement in that commission.
Okay. Oh, Paul.
Yeah, I may have missed this. What exactly is the home rule petition? Just a quick summary.
Michael,
So-
Amanda, you want to give a quick summary?
In Massachusetts, municipalities are given home rule authority, which basically says that for anything that the state's given them authority to make laws on, they can, and they can petition to make rules on certain topics that they haven't been given authority to make a rule on. And the energy or the building code being one of them. And so the history here, to my understanding, is that Brookline passed a similar bylaw to ours. It went to the AG and she said, you can't do this because of the building code. And so then they petitioned under home rule in order to do it. And then several other communities have followed. And to my understanding, several other communities have it on their upcoming town article docket. So
it's really to have a stricter building code than the states.
yeah, and it's focused on ours is focused on new construction.
Yeah, okay.
It's really, Paul, where in municipalities that do not have the authority, whether it's regulatory or whether it's state, it gives them the opportunity to say, essentially, we think it's in the interest of our cities and towns for the bodies to have authority, to have that authority, to be able to draft these kinds of changes, despite the fact that the current rules are set that they do not have that authority. And then that's how it gets weighed out in the legislature. And my understanding is that we've had a few home rule petitions in the past that have been successful. I wish Alice were here because she knows this part in and out. But there has been success where it's been advised that cities and towns ought to have that authority, and that it's in the benefit of the state as a whole when those cities and towns are given that opportunities. It
Thank
does
you.
take a long time, and it's as I like to say, it's a heck of a long shot in the dark, because you're essentially saying that you want to be able to give approval for cities and towns that really resides either with the governor's office or with the state legislature. And you could imagine there's hesitancy about offering up that level of approval to any one city or town, because it's sometimes viewed as a patchwork quilt, right? Do you want to have 275 different approaches to a given issue? And of course not, but in some cases, and I think this is a case in point, it shows that innovation can come from the cities and towns individually and collectively as they work together. Long-winded way of saying what that home rule petition is.
No, I appreciate you reminding us about that. I think we've been talking about it just as that phrase, right, for a long time. And so I think it's good to remember what, at the core, what it's about. So any other questions or comments on Amanda's report before we move on? Any other things to highlight? Yeah, Warren.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
sorry.
just,
Go ahead, Warren.
one question, Amanda, I didn't understand from your write-up what the University of New Hampshire fellow would be doing this summer.
Yeah, she's going to be helping with, well, we don't know who it is yet. So whoever they are is going to be helping with the community engagement side of things. There were several, 7 to 10 implementation steps that were in Sustainable Concord related to engagement. And the way that I've written their scope of work, they can pick their topic area out of those 7 and then implement a series of 3 steps with the aim of creating capacity within the division beyond their 10 weeks that they're with us. And so creating material and content potential, I put in for the next year, thinking that we would get hopefully another fellow the year after. And so it's really to increase the capacity of the sustainability division in respect to community engagement. And I think if I'm to be fully transparent, I chose that topic because I got the application like the week after I had joined the town, and I knew we could always use more support for that type of thing. And so hopefully next year, I would hope to have something that was more research-based, maybe more academic-based, would sort of advance priorities by crunching numbers or doing something more related to a specific topic. But for this year, that felt like something that I could quickly write up and submit since I had newly joined.
Great, thank you.
I actually think it's much needed, and it often is one of those items that does get put on the back burner. So I think having someone dedicated to that, even if you don't meet all of the goals that you set out, just to move that forward, I think it's I think it's a great scope of work to consider. So, Jake, you had a comment.
Yeah, I just had a question on for Amanda on the Better Buildings Act and whether you knew if that might overlap with kind of home energy scoring or whether it was more focused on commercial disclosure. And that's okay if you don't know for sure.
So let me get, when I first put this together, I had read them more carefully, and I do see that it says commercial here. And so that leads me to that it's related to that disclosure for commercial buildings, but I had found other historic bills from previous years that were related to home energy scores. And so maybe even if they're not in the current legislative year, there could be useful content in there. So I can try to track that down again.
And I know that Massachusetts has been kind of experimenting with different home energy score type approaches. So, you know, I could see it being a part of some other legislation or potentially, you know, coming up. So that's why I asked. Thanks.
Okay, great.
John, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I don't think it's in this report, and I can't remember if it was in last month, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I read that the municipal, I always forget what it is. It's the statewide consortium that the light plant participates in with other light plants.
E&E, Energy New England.
Yeah, I thought I read that they entered into a deal with Vineyard Wind or one of the offshore wind projects to acquire power. And so I was wondering, I assume that included Concord, but I was wondering about that. And if we hadn't reported on it before, maybe it would be good to hear some more about that, how that plays into our plan.
Where did you read that? John, was it in their report, in E&E's report, or you're not remembering?
I'm not remembering.
Okay.
I saw it in an email, John. Like I saw an email that came out. I can't remember who it was from, whether it was whichever group. But yeah, I saw that as well and thought it was pretty good, like really good news. But I haven't seen anything specifically from the light plan. I'm not sure if it was in Amanda's last update.
Right. Or presumably that would have a big effect on our emissions coefficient. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't reported out on it, and I don't have much to share, so let me look into it and I can bring information next time.
great, thanks.
You said from Vineyard Energy?
Vineyard Wind, I think.
Vineyard Wind.
I think it's, I can't keep straight which wind project is which, but
Michael?
Following along those same lines, Amanda, in your report out, you mentioned the Green Futures Act that establishes a green infrastructure fund. And I'm wondering if we can track that down a little more, particularly since that may be one of the priorities of CAB, as I recall in the last meeting. We talked a little bit about that. Could we find more information about it and how relevant that is to anything that we can do to either aid it or how we might benefit from it if we decide that we want to take up that priority about setting up some kind of revolving loan fund?
Yeah, and this was the bill that was listed in that NC4 letter that they needed a quick turnaround on. And I haven't been able to read more about it, but happy to connect the folks that are working on the financing piece to this, and we can dig into it more.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. Well, with that, I just wanted to say I really like the layout of your update, really easy to read. I like the different elements, especially adding a legislation piece there helps me to keep track, certainly, because there's so much. And the events and engagement pieces just as good reminders. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time and keeping us all updated. This is great. All right. With that, I'll speed back up to the top. Good. And I kind of expected we would take a little bit more time on your update because you had a lot there. And so in my mind had planned for it. But so let's move on and talk briefly about the topic that we left off or sort of left hanging, I'll say, from the last meeting. It was the vice chair election process. And just to remind us, we talked about the idea of actually appointing or electing a vice chair to kind of serve in that backup role, but also learning, and for if I'm not here, just for someone to lead the meeting. But the other thing I think that we had discussed was the process of actually, chair election and how the vice chair may or may not, be involved in that. So it's really, I guess, bullets 4 and 5 there. So I guess touching on the first one, we had called last time for anyone who was interested to throw their name in the hat, so to speak, through email. I don't believe we received any interest on that. So I will just ask here openly in this forum, is there anyone who is interested in filling that role for the next, we can even say it's for a shorter time until we have some new members, and we could revisit that if that is something that CAB would be willing to do. Is anyone willing to, or is anyone interested, I guess, in taking on the vice chair role? I hear crickets, so this happened to me the last time I chaired a committee. I should learn already. I had no vice chair for 3 years, which was the appointed time I had to serve as chair. So I don't know. It's either me or I won't take it personally. Well, why don't we do this, since I think no one's chomping at the bit and I don't anticipate missing any meetings in the near term. Why don't we work through our recruiting process a little bit and see if we, in the next couple of months, are able to bring on 2, maybe 3 even more members. I think at one point we were at 9. I think now we would be right about there. And why don't we revisit that vice chair position? I'm asking, does that seem reasonable? But I think that's where we're at. So I will suggest that's what we do. If anyone has an objection, voice it now. All right, so with that, then I think let's move on to the election process. And let's just have a quick discussion on what we'd like to see that look like in the future. I think we had sort of 3 different options. We had a chair, a existing chair appointed transition. That's really, I think, what's happened in the past. We talked about the idea of a vice chair being elected and then moving into that role as a second option. And then I think the third option maybe was a little bit different. Warren, I think you had some concerns about that second option. And so maybe there's a hybrid where we do have a chair and a vice chair ideally, and the vice chair could opt in, but isn't committed or required. I know, Warren, do you want to vet that out a little bit more?
Yeah, my only concern is I do not want a process in which the chair is selecting his or her successor. I want a process by which there is an opportunity for anybody on the committee who wants to be chair or vice chair to put their name forward.
To state there.
And I don't think we should assume it should be automatic that the vice chair becomes the chair. No, it has nothing to do with and then none of this has to do with the quality of any of the folks,
Sure. Yeah.
former chairs or current chairs. But you could have a situation where somebody is appointed as a vice chair. They seem like they would be perfect to be chair. And then the chair stepping down 2 years later. And it actually would be useful to have someone with different skills as chair.
Yeah.
So all I would suggest is that there be a process by which people have the opportunity to put their name forward before there's a vote. And
Okay.
that it's not assumed that the chair gets to select the successor.
So could we do it in such a way that it's a so I'm not sure I have the right words here, but where the vice chair is kind of automatically a candidate unless they opt out, but others can be nominated, and it's a and so then it's a vote. It's an open vote.
Yeah.
Does that seem
That would
reasonable, or
sound-
is
that
it?
would
Are you
sound fine.
stacking?
That would sound fine to me.
Okay. I don't want us to feel like we're stacking.
No,
the deck
that
in
would
their
be fine
favor,
for
but
me.
okay. Okay. Any other thoughts on that, or?
I think it should be understood that, if someone doesn't step up, that the chair it's okay for the chair to try to recruit someone, because I think
That's a
I
good
agree. I think I agree with Warren. It's good practice that there
Mhm.
should be a step where there's a call for interest or nominations, so that
Mhm.
everyone has an opportunity to say whether they would like to do it or not. Then we can
Mhm.
decide. My guess is in many instances, it'll be like tonight when no one wants to take on additional responsibility.
Right.
And it'll be necessary for someone for the chair to proactively try
Right.
to cajole someone into doing it.
Yep. Okay. All right. I
Is
like
there-
that.
Sorry
Yeah.
for
Go ahead, Michael.
interrupting. Are there any best practices out there with all the other committees, the planning board and select board? How do they go about the process of selecting for a chair? Or is there such a groundswell of so many people that they just nominate and then they vote, and it's a non-issue?
Amanda, you did ask that question, I believe, of the assistant town manager. right?
Yeah, so I think it is primarily that at a first meeting, the current chair would say, I'm looking to step down and I am looking for nominations for chair. Is anyone interested? And take nominations perhaps at that meeting. And then I think leaving that meeting like we did last time, if anyone's interested, email the chair of your interest. And then at a second meeting, present the nominations, give the nominees, if there's more than one, an opportunity to say, this is why I'm qualified. And then the board would vote on it. And that just is, it makes all of the decision making in the public process. It also provides the public opportunity to comment if they would like. And so I have just typed those up. And so if it's helpful, I mean, I think this relates to something that Courtney and I have talked about working on, as a little bit of a governance document for ourselves and
Yeah.
protocol, so that when we have turnover, it's easier for folks to take on positions. And I think this would be a part of that.
Yeah, agreed. Yep. And it would be, I think, pretty simple, but
Yeah.
yeah, so I would suggest we kind of write up the process that we've heard. I'll take anyone else who has comment, we can do so, but write up what we've heard. It sounds like, Amanda, you've already kind of been working on that in the background, and then we will bring it back to the committee next time for just review and approval. Does that sound reasonable? But before we close it out, any more comments on what we talked about?
Maybe part of that governance structure would also include terms, or I don't know if we have term limits, or how long does any one individual on the board. It's always good to refresh. My experience has been, it's
Right.
always been good to refresh a board. New
We do have-
ideas. things like
Yeah,
that.
we do have.
I don't know how that works.
2-year terms, but I don't know if we have term limits.
2 years.
Yeah.
I think that for the, I don't know if this is true for all the committees, but I believe there's up to a 3-year term, and then you can be renominated for another up to 3-year term.
Oh, okay.
Maybe 2 or 3, I can't remember.
Okay.
But I agree. I was just going to say, I agree with the process that other committees are using. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I was also just going to bring up what Michael said, which was, I think it would be good for the committee and for the current chair to sort of, whoever is stepping into that role, to sort of say, okay, there's like ideally there's a 1-year, knowing things, we're all volunteers and things change, but there's like kind of a 1-year expectation of service. And ideally your end date would align with that. So you could, like, if you're terming out in 3 years and you can't be renominated, then you probably shouldn't be serving as a chair unless no one else wants to do it, I guess. So I think we just need to maybe clarify, okay, what's what kind of term are we looking for?
Yeah.
And then can chairs, rerun, essentially, assuming we just use the same process and nominate themselves. So I think just writing that up and having that kind of agreed to would be awesome.
Yep. Okay. Great. Thank you for all your feedback. Appreciate that. I'm glad we could bring some minimal formality to that, but I think it's good. All right. With that, then we're not too far behind, but we did want to circle back to the CAB priority discussion that we've been having, really, and kind of highlight some next steps that we had talked about. And really it was, Amanda and I, and then Jake some too. In terms, so if you remember the last time we met, we looked at the matrix, and I think the matrix is at the back of the packet, isn't it? Yeah. And, we'd actually put names to these boxes in terms of champion. So, but okay, where do we go from here? I think we just ended the conversation, if I remember right. And it's like, all right, now what? So we did a little bit of brainstorming, and I know there's been a little bit of discussion out of session about a couple of those, but what we were thinking, and this is still pretty loose, but just to give a high level, and Amanda, feel free to fill in where I've missed things, but the intent of these priorities is that we make some progress on them. And I think in my mind, at least, it's, make some progress over the next 6, 8, 12 months, maybe it's a 12-month thing in reality, given we meet monthly and the speed with which, we can work given all of our other responsibilities. But, certainly if we can go faster, or if there are opportunities that would come up, that it'd be great to jump on, maybe we can push some forward faster than others. But what we'd like to have each champion think about is sort of developing a proposal, and then bring it back to the group. And the proposal being, I think in one of our meetings and discussions, we had talked about, well, here's our goal, but there's really lots of steps that would go into this goal. And I don't remember which priority it was we were discussing, but, really starting to think through what are those immediate steps to get us to the goal that we, that we identified. And in some cases, the goal is I guess more defined than others. So it might be, a first step before you can even sort of think through the immediate steps is to better define the goal and what we want to do there. I'm thinking for myself in particular, this zoning bylaws and regulatory avenues, there's a lot here. And so just really taking the time to sit down and think through, what goal can we reasonably accomplish in the next, maybe near term of 6 months and long term of 12, if you want to think of it that way. And then, what would be some of the steps, or start to build out some of the steps we need to take to get there. And then once I think we have that, then going the next step and saying, all right, well, probably you're not going to be able to do this in a vacuum. So, what interactions with either town staff, other committees, other departments within town might be, crucial relationships and conversations to begin to have or develop. So that is a high level sort of what we were thinking about, and asking each champion to sort of work on this in the next month-ish. Maybe it's 2, but to come back to the group with these, kind of 3 areas thought through to a degree enough that we could discuss it and get input from other CAB members. And then ultimately, as you work through the process, and and the process will inevitably change, rather than spending whole CAB meetings talking about, each of these priorities, just, doing some quick check-in on each. And maybe there isn't a check-in for everyone every meeting, but just having the opportunity for each champion to come back and say, okay, this is what we've gotten done so far, or this is the roadblock we've encountered. What ideas do you have for us? But sort of allotting a regular agenda item for check-in on that. Did I cover everything? Is there anything else we talked about? And I'm sure there'll be there'll be questions and comments. That's fine, but make sure.
Yeah, I think 2 important things, definite emphasis on some of these are going to move at different paces, and may at times often go quiet because maybe we all need to focus on a particular issue at hand. And so I think there's flexibility in that as well, based on people's availability and as that changes throughout the course of the year too. And so I think the key here is communication and just keeping people up to speed on what that work plan is and how it shifts. And I think the other piece of it that I would say beyond using each meeting to check in on each initiative would be if there's something that could use like a workshopping additional bullet on the agenda, it would be helpful to let Courtney and I know that, and then we'll add it into the agenda to have time to specifically focus in on whatever issue that is month to month. And so some of this is going to require coordination out of committee, and some of it we can still workshop and do as a group. But I also want to say that I feel like I will be involved in this as well, and some of it's helping me figure out next steps, but also helping you get the things you need. Like if you're trying to figure out something, can I connect to the right people and get the right information and help take pieces of the work plan as well. So I think that's the last piece. And then the other one, which was like checking in with departments and stuff, the first priority. I think that's part of the governance document that Courtney and I will work on putting together for your review.
So thoughts, questions, feedback?
I'll just add, I mean, I think this is a great next step for us, and I think will help, ensure that we're revisiting these priorities that we've identified and give an opportunity for folks who are championing them to, get feedback. And I think the only question or thought I have is, is there any template or approach that we want to use for our work plan that we might, think we could share that people could kind of leverage, that would be, I guess, helpful for both the champions as well as for Cab and Amanda in terms of just kind of keeping track of this.
Mm-hmm. I had just written that down as you were speaking before you said it. So yeah, I do wonder if that could be helpful. For me, certainly.
And I mean, happy to just copy something that, like, obviously, whatever we can borrow legally,
Right.
great, to avoid reinventing the wheel. But
Right. I think it can be pretty simple, but I like the idea, Jake, of figuring out. We were talking about this as it related to the annual report that Amanda pulled together quickly, and but we were thinking, like, gosh, it'd be really great to just draw from our Sustainable Concord kind of framework that we already have and report that way, rather than, I think what we've done in the past has been more organic, and not that it has to be, not that it can't be organic, but I think it would help us then to get to where we are reporting on the priorities that we set forth in that plan already. So yeah, we could think about that, Amanda. If we're thinking template, think about how that could dovetail into that reporting aspect.
Yeah, I might, if I can share my screen. This is what I love Excel. So if you don't, then this isn't going to be for you. But I mean, I'm a huge Gantt chart lover. And so, I would, do you see my screen? I froze for a second, I think.
Yeah, here it comes. Okay.
This is the library sustainability committee, implementation committee, has their strategies and actions all laid out, and they've put in, you know, the 4 quarters for the years and what are they going to do. And I could see taking our priorities that we have, kind of these at least initial steps, we go down here, and maybe some of these need a little bit more detail, broken down a little bit more, but laying that out maybe in this first column, and then saying by, you know, meeting time each month, this is what we hope to have accomplished, and kind of just fleshing out those details a bit more as sort of the next step. Because I think this gets to one of the comments that came last month, is that really what are we working towards? Is it something that we're bringing to town meeting? Is it something that we're asking for funding for? Is it, what exactly is that? And I think this would be, you know, I guess maybe I was asked that and I'm flipping it back to the committee to help me figure that out for the different priorities. And I'm happy to meet with folks outside of the meeting to figure out what that looks like. Especially, you know, some of them, you know, Courtney, I tied you into a planning board meeting email today. And there are other things that, you know, Jake, you're already in Concord Heats Electric. So we've talked a little bit about your priority as well. And Paul and John, we've been meeting with Suasco. So definitely available outside of committee to help formulate what that looks like.
Yeah, I have some on the vulnerability assessment. I have some thoughts about how to approach that, but I'd want to discuss it with Paul and you, Amanda. But you know, in my mind, we're recommending to the town government that a vulnerability assessment be conducted, and so I'm envisioning a written recommendation that makes the case why it's important to do, what kinds of concerns the town might have. So flooding obviously was one. I'm personally concerned about what's going to happen to our landscape. But and then so laying out that case, and then also discussing, well, what needs to be done to really set up for a vulnerability assessment, because we're not really in a position to just start doing one. So like the work that you're facilitating to get some regional flood modeling done would be a key step. And there'd be other sort of study steps, I think, that would be needed that would then set up for the town's ability to conduct the assessment. But in the end, it would be a written recommendation, probably, I guess, to the select board and town manager, and through them to relevant departments. But I agree, you know, each of these priorities might be a different approach, right? Because they're different topics.
But I think in your example, John, I'm thinking, you know, it'd be helpful. You kind of have this in your head, or, you know, at least the start of it, right? It'd be helpful for making the case to fund it, right? Because it's going to need to be funded, or, you know, maybe there are grant opportunities, which we think there might be, you know, and how do we pursue those? But I just think having us kind of work through that so that we can then make the case, it just sets us up to make the case better for, you know, funding and, you know, going out for RFP or whatever ends up happening in that particular case. But, you know, like Warren's funding priority might be very different. But I think we could come up with a template that sort of encapsulates, you know, the different needs for the different goals. So trying to think through, you know, what is the information needed to make the case for whatever outcome we hope to get out of that particular priority, or set of outcomes if it's multiple. Okay. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, I like the overall process that's been suggested, particularly the idea that the end result is is a written recommendation. That
Good.
gives us something to shoot for. And
Yeah,
I think the process that, John and I were doing with Amanda about the vulnerability study is a really good process.
something that might be helpful, I know would be helpful for me, and maybe you all know it better than I do, having served on town committees longer, but I'm thinking understanding the budgeting timeline for the town, when funds, like say for, large and small projects have to be allocated. I know that a little bit, but I know there's a whole process that starts usually far before the final, budget is allocated. So the funding process, and then I'm thinking the process for town meeting, I've only really gotten to, I feel like on the fringes of that personally through this committee to really understand that. I didn't grow up in Massachusetts. I don't know if you can tell from my lack of accent, but so town government is very new to me, having not been just not a resident for that long. So yeah, I don't know, those two things might help just in terms of, funding opportunity and then schedule. Obviously, I don't think we're looking for the town to fund all this. We'd be looking for grant opportunities as well, but just having an understanding of, when would we need to make our case if we want the town to pursue this, this being any of the priorities that we're talking about. I don't know. Or have any of you seen, good documents that are available that maybe highlight that already? And I don't want to put work on Amanda if it's already out there.
It would be good to have some key milestones, like if we want to make a budget, recommend that something be put in the budget to know when it is we need to say that by.
Right. Right. Okay.
I think broadly speaking, I know it was when I first came to town that they were started to put together the town meeting budget for the upcoming town meeting. And so that was October.
Yeah,
and then
that sounds
it
about right.
goes through a series of meetings with FinCom and many other things. And then it will be presented at town meeting.
Okay.
But I've seen articles like the article that established CAB, for example, had, I think, a statement in there to have $100,000 to create a climate action plan. And so although there's like the budgeting of departments, it seems like sometimes articles also I'd say that we need funding for certain things.
Okay. All right, any other comments?
Yes, this is Warren. I think the process that you laid out is a good one. This is a comment on the particular task that I volunteered for.
Okay.
And I did not look at it carefully enough last time. And I had thought the task was to identify new funding streams for residential upgrades. The way it's written here is narrower than that, and it specifies it has to be a zero interest loan fund. I wanted to have the committee's indulgence for me to be considering other possible funding streams, such as something like on-bill financing or property assessed clean energy assessment. as opposed to it having to be a revolving zero interest town loan fund, because that may be hard to achieve.
What does the board think of that? Any reservations there?
I agree, it should be a broad approach, because I think it's going to take a lot of different
Mhm.
funding strategies, and like PACE, I believe we already opted into PACE, but I think the issue is, well, how do we get some uptake on that?
Yeah.
And then I think we should also, to achieve our goals, we really have to go outside the box. So I'm inspired by the model in Ithaca,
Yeah.
and figuring out, is there a way we could also harness private capital to do some of this stuff, right? Because they're not big. I don't know what Concord's budget is, but I read Ithaca's municipal budget is $80 million. So I don't think they're that much different than us.
Yeah, I think you're right, John.
I
So
agree, I agree with John, and I think it aligns with, well, the UNH fellow, the two areas that she delved
Right.
into in terms of financing was on bill and this revolving loan fund. But I agree, there's other models out there that other communities are using. So I think it would be beneficial to have Warren take a look at those and come back with some feedback and get input, and have a broader focus, and then narrow down as we learn more.
For what it's worth, the focus on interest-free loans for residents and setting that up somehow as a revolving loan fund was input received from CMLP to focus on that as to narrow in on that. So just wanted to put that out there, that I had talked to Janicetti about what would be helpful, and this is what she brought up, that a financing mechanism for that would be helpful. And I have heard her, reiterate that. And I think that could partially be driven by Mass Save has interest-free loans, but if they're trying to convert someone from fuel oil to electricity, CMLP doesn't currently offer the same benefit, the same opportunity as Mass Save. So just for what it's worth, that's kind of where that specificity came from, but that doesn't necessarily have to limit what you do. Just wanted to provide context.
Amanda, has any of that maybe changed with the new, what we expect to be the new Mass Save rebates for heat pumps, and the ability of CMLP to match those rebates?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because I also was talking to Jan the other day, and she heard, some of this is all waiting for the DPU to approve it, right? And so she had recently heard that the rebates from Mass Save will be eligible for natural gas users for heat pumps and others, even if they're switching to electricity, but that the loans wouldn't be, just the rebates. So hard to say. And I think that having, even if it is the expenditure forecast for the upcoming year did not include that in CMLP's, expenditure forecast. So I don't think it's something that they're currently planning on.
Thanks.
Well, I think it is helpful feedback. We at one time had talked about, we had a priority to, I can't remember what we called it, or it wasn't a priority, but it was on our list to kind of shepherd, if you will, more energy strategies with CMLP, and then we talked, I think one of us said, well, but what if they don't want our help? So in this case, they're giving us feedback and saying this is a very specific area that they need help in. But I don't, so I think we should just be cognizant of that, and maybe it is worth, Warren, making sure that, you do look into that in particular, but not limit the scope.
Yeah,
just
I'm
for that.
happy to consider that and consider ways in which we could find a funding source for that
Yeah.
sort of loan fund, but
Yeah,
I just hate to restrict myself to that because there could be other things that turn out to be more promising or more feasible.
right. No, I think that makes sense. So I think, keeping bullet B in there, as you think about how you're going to do it, but expanding to then look at other opportunities as well. So it sounds like the board is in general agreement with that. So
And Warren, I got an email today that is CMLP looking for you to connect you with other people that are interested in looking at this. So you can maybe expand capacity and you won't need to do it all on your own. You can lean on
Okay,
this
great.
other group of people.
yeah, excellent.
Also, I think there was and I don't remember who brought that up, but Holyoke as an example when we were talking about where you would nest a revolving loan fund that would be sourced by a systems benefit fund, not unlike what the investor-owned utilities have been doing for many, 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 many years. And I thought that Holyoke, and it might be something I could check into and see if I can learn any more, had a template of essentially that, setting up it wasn't just about zero interest, and it was about a revolving fund. And the key, I think, somehow is that they were sourcing it from monies that they had gotten approval at town meeting to put what effectively would be a surcharge on every kilowatt hour sold. The uniqueness of that is not the idea. The uniqueness is this has not been applied with MWAC, with any of the Massachusetts municipals, as I understand it. So there might be something there, Warren. I'll try to see if I can dig into it a little bit to see if that it's so sometimes thinking that you need to reinvent the wheel, rather than how you actually execute the scale is the real challenge. And so there might be something there. But I would agree with you. I think everyone.
If you find out anything, let me know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much it matters, but to the degree you can keep an eye toward this financing, enabling mandatory requirements down the road would be useful. I don't know that certain kinds of financing mechanisms work better for that or not. I mean, I think going by the experience of the utility programs, that the uptake on it is way too slow. And my sense is at some point there'll have to be requirements for people to make these upgrades. They won't just happen because they pencil out on paper.
Right. Well, that was sort of my earlier thought and request around that Green Futures Act, where an infrastructure, some kind of financial infrastructure fund is in play. And maybe there's some way that municipalities can have access to that rather than just the investor-owned utilities. Maybe so.
Okay. All right. Any more discussion related to sort of priority process I think what I took away that we will come up with a template that we can use. It might be a bit broad or general, but just, categories of things to begin to think about as you plan steps towards the goal. Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, should we aim for some progress by next meeting? If you give
I
us a
think so.
template? Yeah,
Yeah, I think so.
okay, I agree.
Yeah, and if if you don't get to it by next meeting and aren't prepared to, that's fine. We will we will be patient. We're all volunteers here, right? So we're going to do the best we can. Instead, we will use.
Just some light shaming.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We'll use guilt
Minor.
and shame, loosely, to encourage momentum. Yeah.
Well, we should probably take into consideration that we'll all be calling Amanda for help. And,
That's right.
and
Depending
so
on
her
schedule.
bandwidth will be strained. So
That's right. That's right. So, we did that in much less time, and so that's great. I guess, Amanda, you had seen this on other committee agendas, the kind of the item of just new business, and I think we wanted to float the idea or ask the question, I guess, whether there's any particular other topics than the priorities that we're going to be working on that CAB could see as good future, potential either presentations or discussions for future meetings. It would be great to get an idea of, if we want to hear from folks, either that we've heard from in the past and we'd like to hear an update. I think we mentioned a couple already tonight, but it'd be a great time to start to think about those even through maybe the summer if we can. And it's only 4 to 5 meetings or so. But I'm thinking, again, the CAB priorities may take precedent the whole time, depending on what we've got to discuss. But likely it won't. And so if there are other topics we want to make sure we are covering, we're hearing about. So we'll leave the new business item on for future meetings, but that's really what I was hoping to open it up to CAB tonight. And I have a couple of thoughts, but I'll pause and see if anyone has anything top of mind.
Well, I was wondering if it's useful to think about at some point taking a step back and looking at where, assessing where we're at a regular interval. I don't know what time of year that's best to do that at, but not that I expect we do a emissions inventory every year, but to have a sense of the direction and pace of change.
Gotcha.
Might just be that this year as we're putting things in place, and we should focus on that, and next year maybe look at what's happening to electricity and gas use and whatever other kinds of data we're able to collect.
Okay. Yeah, Paul.
So following on John's comments, there are indicators out there, and we might think about setting up a bunch of indicators and just tracking them every year to see how we're doing. And I don't know exactly. I mean, I know that indicators exist. I'm sure you can find them, and it'd be useful to do that to track our progress. The other thought I had was, and again, this may have been done in previous meetings of this committee, is to have some of the town departments come in and talk to us. For example, be interesting to hear what the Public Works Department is doing about, climate change, vulnerability, and adaptation.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know if it's, I mean, it's sort of in our mission here.
Mhm.
And I assume CMPL has come in and spoken to us, and
They have, but it might be good to have an update, as John mentioned.
yeah, but I think since this committee has not done too much on vulnerability or adaptation, it may be good to see what some of the town committees are doing on that.
Mhm.
But maybe that's something, it's too specialized for all members of this committee. So maybe only, let's say, John, I, Amanda should do that. I don't know. I don't know what the precedent is.
I'll just build on that to say, I mean, I think we talked about the last time having, some sort of set of metrics that we can track progress. So I think, and Amanda, kind of took that on. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I also think that maybe as a group, we need to think about scheduling meetings or conversations with other key committees or groups that are, I mean, almost like a forcing mechanism for us to kind of bring up, hey, we've been working on researching financing mechanisms and home energy score, and like we want to get feedback from the light board or the light plant, or to Paul's point, maybe it's the Public Works Department on vulnerability assessment. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, these conversations don't have to be full meeting conversations or a part of our agenda, but it probably needs to be part of a work plan initially. And then it may make sense for us to have a chunk of our meeting where we're engaging with another committee or department and really either advocating for something or doing an initial pitch, if you will, and getting feedback. So I think that could be valuable for us to consider and think about as far. I mean, I think this ties into the work plans and everything else and the priorities, but.
Yeah, well, what I'm wondering is, again, getting back to that, once you think through some of the immediate next steps, identifying some of those groups that would be key. And I think some of that is actually in the, what do we call them? The blueprints. Already, some of that work we did. So it'd be a starting point. But if I remember right, a lot of the blueprints, the list was very long. And so, it might not be that all of those, would be so helpful. And so identifying, at least 2 or 3 to target to start out with. No, I like that. I like that idea. I know, in infrastructure work, I've often found it's more effective if we who are looking for the feedback go to them versus having them come to us. So it might be something for us to think about is, and I do think at one point we talked about liaisons with different departments or different committees. Several of these have, I'm thinking Parks has a committee, Parks and Rec, and Public Works has a committee, not Public Works staff, but a committee, right, of volunteers just like us. But it might be worth, getting some two-way communication there going. A couple of other thoughts I had, there's a lot of infrastructure, potentially a lot of infrastructure money that may be coming down, or is probably, maybe, I don't know what state it's in, whether it's, been signed yet or it's just a lot of hype, but coming down to communities. And I noted on something that came through to me this week, that the select board is actually going to be having a meeting to talk specifically about that. So I plan to participate and be glad to bring that back. But then, there might be more conversation around that. Now that in particular is infrastructure related, though it might dovetail, Michael, with that Green Futures Act. I'm not sure. I believe there's a couple of others in the works as well. So, it's always great when we get some money to do some of this stuff. So I think it's important that we know, what might be coming our way. From an infrastructure perspective, what I've understood currently is a lot of it will come through the channels we already know about, which is grant funds or loan funds that are already established. But there may be additional ones as well. So the MVP, for instance, may get a flush of money more than they've had in the past. And so, that we are thinking about that next round of funding is really important. So I don't have a particular item, but it may be, a good topic for us to discuss and or bring in others to educate us on. Anything else?
I thought perhaps building off of what John was just said earlier about if we could periodically have a sense of metrics of where we are, of what we're working on. And I bring us back to the blueprints, because it seemed to me that the blueprints was the architecture for the steps that we were going to flush out, ultimately creating an operations plan around each of them, and then just simply project manage it like you would a normal assignment. And I don't know exactly where we are with those blueprints now, but I think people will probably come back to us and say, well, what's the status of each of those blueprints, and how are we measuring them, the success of them? Are they the right ones? Again, that was our final plan, right? That was what we said we were going to work on. We've since learned a whole lot. Maybe some of those are no longer relevant. I don't know, but that's sort of the roadmap that was laid out initially, and maybe just keeping up with that and seeing how we're doing on that roadmap. I think the challenge that we're having is that a lot of boards will have, first of all, funding, and they will then define the problem statement, and they'll hire a consultant, and they'll ask the consultant to go out and come back with a very prescribed scope of work around that problem statement, right? In this case, I think what we have is we don't have that funding, and those resources aren't there. And if it's going to be done, it's going to have to be done by actual board members who have full-time jobs, right? Right. And I think that's what we're really bumping up against, the notion of taking on a project management, the amount of time necessary for it, the amount of money that would be required, how you would execute on it, as almost like a job, right? And I think that's going to challenge us. I think it's going to challenge all of us. Rather than being advisors, but actually being project managers.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I think we could clone Amanda, and that clone would have, that would be their job. I really think, in terms of, because we've decided to take on, these 5 priorities, right? But how many blueprints did we have there? So, and a lot of those, I think we were relying or hoping that staff, or committees would take that on, but I don't know that, they've made any progress toward those. I'm not sure.
Yeah, if I could just chime in.
Yeah.
So I think what's confusing is that there are 2 annual reports. So there's the town annual report, and then there's the sustainability division's progress report that was much more based on like metrics and visual and was a standalone document. And so when I've looked at that progress report rather than an annual town report, that's the one that I'm trying to link more to our indicators of success and get an update. And I have emailed not all of the champions, but the primary champions, like the big players of the
Mhm.
blueprints, to see where we're at. And have also asked for metrics, and I've sort of based this in, it's a 5-year plan. We're a year and a half in, which is a quarter of the way.
Mhm.
And so could we have a quick update? And I think this will also give me a sense of what data was easy to collect and what data wasn't easy to collect.
Yeah.
And what's readily available, or what doesn't change that much that it doesn't make that much sense to track it very frequently. And so happy to report out on lessons learned for that. I have received some feedback. I've also received some emails that are, I will get to this. We are just so focused on this that we haven't gotten there yet. But I'm hoping, you know, I said to everyone by the end of January was my goal, to have as much back as we could. And maybe that's sort of the other compromise to be made, is we send it out, we get what we get back, and then maybe that becomes the report out. And throughout the year, we try to get a fuller, like more of a picture of what actually is happening, especially on things we didn't hear back on, which hopefully is not very much. And I think it has also been good because there's been staff turnover in some cases, and there were certain people that I talked to that weren't here or had just joined when the town was publishing it, and it was the first time that they had seen it, or had not seen it in a while and needed that refresher. And so I think it is another way just to get it back on people's radar. But that is coming, and hopefully maybe next meeting I'll have at least a primary, like a first look at where we're at.
I'd be curious how, and I don't know that we have to go into detail, but I'd just be curious how how you asked for the updates, and what, I guess the reason I'm asking that is knowing that everybody in town is super busy and have their own set of priorities. But we're trying to like push this up in their priority list. Really figuring out a way that both streamlines the update for them and for you, right? And I don't know, I'm sure there are templates and examples out there that we could think through, so that it's not two people's effort for you to get the update, and for them, they're focusing more of their time on actually doing the thing rather than updating the update, right? Or providing the update. So, and then too, thinking through the reality of transition. I mean, we've seen it hugely in COVID, and it just, is a good reminder that it happens all the time. And so, staff is going to turn over, and how do you maintain momentum in the event of that? And what is for us, not us in particular CAB, but for sort of, town to, or I guess how much of that is in Amanda's, wheelhouse, and how much of it has to come from a higher source, or, a different message or something. So those are, some thoughts I'd have about just sort of process. This is our first update, correct? We haven't done one. We didn't do one at the year mark because of Kate's transition, if I'm thinking right. Or maybe it was even related to that. I'm not sure, but.
I mean, I can give a glimpse, but I won't reveal all of it yet because it's still very much a work in progress, but you'll get the flavor of my love for Excel by sharing this. But I put everything that was in the blueprints into an Excel so that it was easy to filter and that all of the departments could go through and filter for what they were particularly working on. And I went through and said what I knew of the general status and progress and asked them to review it. And in some case, I didn't know anything. And so there wasn't anything in there. So hopefully it was easy for them to go in. And for some departments that didn't have, maybe they had 1 or 2 priorities, I just sent it to them in an email so they didn't have to go into this craziness. And then I've got the indicators of success with our baseline year, and asking for different departments to put in the metrics for 2021 or 2020, depending upon our baseline numbers. And hopefully we could continue to just use this and put in 2022 so that we can see the change over time. And you can see that a bit more with the other metrics. Say that Kate was reporting out in her progress update. So the amount of rebates provided, we have that information, but it wasn't something that was an indicator of success, but it seemed like we were already tracking it and it could be useful to continue to track it. So in some cases, again, if there was a particular department that only needed to give 1 or 2 indicators of success, I just sent it to them in an email and asked them. And if they had a lot, I asked them if they would go into this shared document. With some, in some cases, pretty detailed instructions on what we were looking for.
Yeah.
So
that looks great. Yeah, that looks great.
Yeah,
I'm sure the bulk of the work was putting it into that spreadsheet. And so now that you've done that, hopefully it will be pretty readily updated in the future. Okay, great. Well, first of all, any thoughts for Amanda on, kind of where she's headed with that, and we'll continue to work on, I'm sure, and we'll report back to the group as it comes along.
I guess one thing that I'll throw out there that I've been wondering is, I know Kate did a 2019 greenhouse gas inventory and she used MAPC's methodology. And I had been thinking would it be worthwhile to use the MAPC methodology with our 2016 data so that we know how different that methodology really is. Because it shows a decline in our emissions from 2016 to 2019. But when I dug into some of the easier categories, like waste went up fairly significantly. And I think it's because we used a different method rather than it actually going up. And I think transportation in 2019 accounted for 30%, whereas in 2016 it accounted for 40%. And that 10% difference, I'm not sure is real. And so I had been looking at that when I had been looking at this data and requesting data. And I knew that this board was probably involved in that. And so that could be a topic we could add to the next meeting. But if anyone has interest in digging into that further, it's something that I've been thinking about and looking at.
I mean, it would, personally, I would like to see, so I thought the indicators that you showed were great. I think those are good ones. I'm personally less inclined to focus too much on overall greenhouse gas emissions, just because there's so many data gaps. I rather know what's happening with electricity and gas usage and how many heat pumps are being installed and things like that, that are more directly measured. So they look like on your spreadsheet, heat pump rebates were declining, which is obviously not good. But I think having those numbers is great. But the thing I wanted to ask is if there's other information that could be pulled together that would enable us to evaluate those trends. So, if we're doing, 36 heat pump installations a year, how does that relate to the total number of buildings we need to retrofit, right? And for us then to be able to say to the town, well, there's some good news here, but we have a long way to go. I think it helps for the town then the community to understand where we're at, the scale of our challenge, and it also helps lay some groundwork for doing some more ambitious things, because probably what we're currently doing is not going to be enough. Not that that's the town's fault. It's just, the way things evolve.
Oh,
Paul?
Michael, you're on mute.
Oh. I think Paul had his hand. No, sorry, that was my hand. For some
I was
reason.
just going to say that, going back, building on a little bit what John was saying, is that would help to crystallize what our actual results are. And, we go back to Ithaca, where they said, okay, we're gonna take 8,000 homes. I'm going to transition those over the next, not 2050, not 2030, in the next 5 years, right? So if we sort of apply that sort of same thinking in our own town, how many homes have we transitioned? I don't know. I mean, I know some friends who have. We've done a little bit, but if it's not strategic, right? And I don't know how many homes we have in Concord, but we would want to see. I know that CSAC and Brett Hubbard is just thrown out a number and said, look, let's go after 300 homes. Let's go after 300 homes a year. We do it for 5 years. That's 1,500 homes. That's respectable, right? But I don't think we have those kind of basic sense. If we did and people looked at it, they might say, I think we might all conclude, oh my goodness, we've got 15 homes. Something's wrong here. We're not going anywhere near Article 51, the greenhouse gas numbers with that kind of information. And that's not huge data. That's not like a data mountain to get over. It's just how many homes? What are we doing in those homes? How many cars? What? 65 electric vehicles in Concord? I don't know what it is. Maybe it's 200. But it's sort of basic things like that that might give us encouragement that we're actually bending the arc here. Actually, the needle is actually moving. Because as we look at so much of the data we have now, it's hard to tell. Is this a good picture? Is it not a good picture? Is 200 heat pumps okay? What is the capacity of the town? What would be the market analysis that would say how many could be changed? That kind of basic numbers, I think, might either give us encouragement, or it might say, goodness, we've got to start doing something different. And we need to go to the town manager or the acting town manager and saying, we're nowhere near where we said. Is that important to us? And I think we would start to think more like Ithaca.
Just to add to that, I mean, I think on the encouraging side, part of this Concord Heats Electric conversation, we heard from Jan the other day that, like 75% of the heat pumps that they discovered were installed were outside of like a coaching and direct rebate
Program.
Engagement, if you will. So there's a significantly higher, we believe there's a significantly higher number of heat pumps being installed to offset some sort of heating or cooling need than what we're actually able to track through the rebate process and through the methods that the light plan has. But on the flip side of that, we still don't know we don't have a good insight into heat pumps and how they're being used, and all of the other heating and cooling technologies that are deployed across our 6,000 to 7,000 or whatever the number is. I think it's around 7,000 homes, not to mention the commercial side. And one of the things that we've been kind of trying to reiterate with Jan is like, we need a strategic approach to targeting these folks that are, older equipment, in fuel oil, like potentially transition to gas. I think I've said this before, so I won't get off the soapbox, but you're right. Like I think these kinds of activity-oriented metrics are really important for us to understand and do a better job of capturing and figure out how do we fill those data gaps so that we really understand how we're progressing and understand if that's good or bad or how we can do better.
Yeah,
I think that, that's interesting, that having the context of those numbers. So, you could have increasing numbers of heat pump installations, but if you're going from like 25 to 50, maybe that looks good, but that may be nowhere near what you need, right? And also maybe people are putting in heat pumps, but they still have their furnace boiler connected, and they're heating with that in the winter and just using a heat pump for cooling or supplemental
right.
space conditioning. It's understanding that is important. We in Cambridge, we've been talking to Block Power, and I'm hopeful they're going to be coming to Massachusetts because they're the vendor in Ithaca. And they told us, Ithaca got a lot of press because they raised commitments for $100 million of financing, which sounded great, right? And the Block Power says their estimates are they actually need like $2 billion of financing to do all those retrofits. And so that's the kind of thing you need to understand, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're just going to be
chipping away.
Yeah.
Right.
Would it be a helpful exercise? So for the next meeting, thinking very immediately, we are, I think, in town meeting article realm in terms of, those coming out soon. I don't know if they'll come out, the proposed will come out before or after our next meeting, but probably one of the upcoming two we should dedicate to, I think we've done this in the past, but talking through any that we might as a board support. So we'll plan to do that, but could we take another set of time and maybe dig into the indicators of success a bit more as a group, and to look at that data, even if it's not, and I guess, Amanda, we can talk about, what we want to look at in terms of numbers and how comfortable we feel, right, sharing with a bigger group. But I'm thinking just to dig into those a little bit more, and are they the right ones? Do we need to add some specificity to some of them, or do we need to add metrics where we're not covering everything? I'm sure it's a great first list, but maybe that's something collectively we could talk about. And then I think it also helped me anyway to know, where you are, what the source of data is, to understand if we can get more, if we want to dig deeper, can we get it, or do we just not have it? And so it's going to require, a little more digging to really be able to figure out if the needle's moving or not. But I think what everyone said, I like where we're heading is towards figuring out if this set of data that we have can help us to understand, are we headed in the right direction, or are we really off the mark? And I'm thinking at this point, it's really, we're not even fine tuning. We want to know if we're, close or really far. And so let's think about putting that on our next agenda, or either February or March. And by then, surely you'd have some more feedback too from other groups potentially to add to that. Okay. All right, well, with that, we are just about out of time, and Stephen-
7:59, that's right
I
on the money
know,
there,
right?
Courtney.
I mean, we
tell
could
ya.
probably talk more, but I also want to respect time. We had, nobody from the public showed up. So
We've successfly, achieved no public participation.
I'm not sure
After
what
several
that
years,
says.
we finally have no one from the public joining.
I'm not sure how to read that.
Sorry, public.
I don't know how to read that either.
We're not doing enough, apparently.
Yeah. No.
Oh, or
Anyway.
it could be that we're doing so much that people all feel like they don't need
Yeah.
to
They're
keep an eye
good.
on
They're
us.
good. Yeah. Or
I
they-
think the special town meeting that everyone knows they have to go to and vote at tomorrow night.
That's tomorrow night. I agree.
causing the issue. That's
Yeah, I think that's probably true. They're putting all their civic eggs in that one basket this week. So we'll say that's it. We'll say that's it. All right. Well, with that, I think great discussion tonight. And you made it easy on me for the first full meeting to run. So thank you.
Great job.
With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
I'll second.
Excellent. All in favor? Do we have to all in favor?
Aye.
I
Aye.
thought someone told me we didn't even have to make this motion. Didn't Matt tell us that the last time?
Was that, yeah,
Thank you.
But we'll keep it up, pretenses, right? So,
Hmm.
All right. Thank you all.
right.
See
Okay.
you.
Thanks,
you.
Courtney.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Courtney.
everybody.
Nice job.
Bye.